As you join in this morning, just a simple request, and that is to give yourself the luxury of being intent in your body, sitting up straight, perhaps pulling your shoulders down away from your ears, softening the forehead, breathing much, much deeper than normal, allowing yourself to not breathe shallowly from the chest up, but to breathe below the navel, breathing in, allowing the belly to soften, and coming to an understanding that you have the capability of directing that breath, of sending it to places perhaps in your physical body that need a little bit more attention. There's something very beautiful when we do this, when we pause, when we come out of unconsciousness and become conscious and become mindful of the moment. And so this is what we're doing. And so as we prepare to receive together, I just ask that you give yourself that gift, that luxury of mindfulness in terms of sitting and breathing. And it is in this now that I surrender to the all in all. I surrender to the all in all, that which is the boundless, infinite energy system of creation, that which I in my humanness can't even comprehend. I surrender to that. And in my surrendering, I began to set down to dissolve all attachment, all identity, so that I may become a willing instrument, a vessel for its wisdom to move through me, to speak through me, so that it becomes particularized for those who hear. And so know that as that is my intent, I invite you to create the intent that you hear and receive that wisdom with a pure heart, with a beginner's mind, with a delightful expectation that indeed you are receiving a gift. I am receiving a gift. We all are a part of a collaborative surrendering to the all. And that is what we set forth today, giving thanks for life, and never ceasing to forget to give thanks for the energy of freedom that exists beyond the parameters of what we may see in our human experience. Allow us now to partake of this, and in gratitude we say, Ashe, Amen, and so it is. Good morning. Good morning. It was wonderful to be able to share this morning with a spiritual group, a Center for Spiritual Living in Concordia, Rhode Island. I'm really beginning to love this opportunity of being a part of these communities that perhaps I would not have been able to get to if I was confined to physical travel. There are so many things with regards to physical travel, all of the preparation, all of the finance, all of the lumbering around in our physicality in order to get to that, the limitations of dates and times. And so I'm being given an opportunity to really understand the beauty of this virtual component. Yes, there is something to say about being in the tangible physical presence of one another, and for that I too am grateful. But I am also grateful for new frontier, for new terrain, for always remaining teachable. And so knowing that as I look at my calendar, as invitations continue to come in, I'm getting to go across the planet and to be with people. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you today in a roundabout way. And so with this group in Rhode Island, the minister had commented on the writings, the daily guides that I was privileged to author for a magazine called Science of Mind. And that was for the month of May. And he specifically wanted me to talk about day number 1. And it was something called Living the Life of the Deeply Inspired. And that got me to thinking again of going back into the origin of that phrase. Decades ago, I was reading an Alice Walker novel. And maybe tell me if you can relate to this or not. But I was reading. It was a story about a couple struggling and overcoming obstacles. And there was a moment in the narrative where solution presented itself. And as the reader, you'd kind of take an inhale, exhale with the characters in the novel. That's what beautiful writing is all about. It draws you in. And as Alice Walker was describing this solution and the way in which it felt with the couple, she said this: "And they slept the sleep of the deeply inspired." They slept the sleep of the deeply inspired. And it was as if electricity jumped off of the page when I read that. It was, yes, indeed, very poetic on Alice Walker's part. But there was something about that phrase that drew me, that sort of connected to me. And I went off on this deeper dive of that phraseology. I began to see and explore and examine what does it mean to not just to sleep the sleep of the deeply inspired, but then to change that phraseology to live the life of the deeply inspired, to sing the song of the deeply inspired, to create from the place of the deeply inspired. What does it mean to be deeply inspired? And that requires of us to move beyond just basic semantics. So I wanted to go on that ride. Just as I've often talked about over the years, how I wanted to go on the ride of the word infinite. Because no matter how much I look at that word, no matter how much I use that word in spiritual jargon, it's not going to hold any meaning for me. It's not going to draw me in unless I surrender to it. So I wanted to surrender to this phraseology of living the life of the deeply inspired. And as I did, common themes began to occur. As I began to look at sages and wisdom keepers and teachers that I admired, one of the commonalities among all of them was this talk about attachment. That most of our societal ills, most of our stress, anxiety, most of our pain and suffering comes from attachment. Again, another deeper dive into what does that mean? And so in that experimentation along with infinity, I began to see how we are all invited to practice non-attachment. And let me explain that non-attachment does not mean disengagement. Actually, not at all. What it means is that whatever we engage in a different energy system, not a system that is confined by attachment, but a system that understands that we are more than who we think we are. So let me back up. So in this quest of wanting to live the life of the deeply inspired, to really see why that pierced my heart so much, I was led along this pathway of non-attachment. I was led along this idea of energy. And what does energy mean? I come from a philosophical path that talks a lot about energy, that thoughts are energy, that those thoughts are creative, that as we become in partnership and more mindful with our capability of energy, then we become collaborative in the way in which we can deliberately direct and create it, right? Again, all well and good. But the more the deeper dive drew me in, and stay with me here, the more that the deeper dive drew me in, the more that I kept seeing it asking of me was to become non-attached to who I am, to become willing to dissolve all of the identities that Western society or that humanity would have me revere as sacred. That I'm not just David. I'm not just a 61-year-old male. That I'm not just a gay man. That I'm not just this or that. That I'm not my illness. That I'm not my physicality. That I'm not anyone's son, that I'm not just these things. And we forget, we are so seduced in the idea of how much those roots of identity are pulling us, weighing us down. And non-attachment is really about taking the ride of dismembering ourselves from these identities. Because here's what happens. To live the life of the deeply inspired, what that is that is a heightened sense of inner freedom, and that in and of itself isn't enough. To live the life of the deeply inspired means that in order for me to experience that inspiration which already exists, I have to let go of who I think I am. I have to let go of this quest to be somebody. You understand? How does this fit within our Western model that is so geared towards individuality and doing your thing and capitalizing on your social presence and overcoming our identity crisis and managing our way through the fears of losing relevancy? All of those things attached to the somebody. And really, when we don't disengage from the somebody, then the energy that we have access to is confined to our somebodyness. Do you follow me? I am only a conduit for the all. I am only a conduit for that deep inspiration at the boundary of my attachment to being somebody. And so this whole idea of being somebody, of cultivating this presence, is actually the paradox. Because what we are here to call to be is no body, no physical body, no attachment to form or story or illness. And in order for us to get there, we must continue to extricate ourselves, if you will, from trying to be somebody in order to become nobody. Because when I become nobody, then there are no boundaries to my access of that universal energy. Did you follow that? If I hold sacrosanct David, who I am, reputation, what you think about me, illness, failures, self-loathing, not enoughness, as long as I contain that, and it doesn't even matter if I'm aware that I'm doing that or not, if I'm doing it, whether conscious or unconscious, then that which is infinite, that which is the all, is confined to the boundaries that I have set up. So if I want to live the life of the deeply inspired, really live the life of the deeply inspired, then I must begin to extricate myself from this label of who I am and surrender myself to the no-body-ness. Because at that particular point, then, the field of that all energy becomes more accessible. To me, that is the deepening of inspiration. So I'm living the life of the deeply inspired. To me, is I'm not living the life of the surface inspired, or I'm not living the life that is contingent upon how things turn out here. I'm living the life of a deep root, so deeply rooted that I will never find the origin of the root. And that becomes the mainstay of that inspiration. So when I prayed before we started, when I invoked my intention, there was this invitation for that which is the all to download, to use me. I'm a vessel. Let me be the instrument. Let me extricate myself from this personality, so that I am no body, but a pure vessel by which whatever inspiration wants to come through comes through. So let me explain how that gets in the way in our culture. We don't even realize that we are still massaging our somebodiness. We work at brand identity. we do care about what other people think. I'm sorry, but we do, and I don't know if any of us will ever fully overcome that. But it's good to notice that, and it's good to make our best attempts at dissolving that, of checking that. And what's so beautiful and understandable to me in Hindu culture is the path of it's the guru. And particularly Neem Karoli Baba, or Maharaji. If you've never really fully explored Neem Karoli Baba, or Maharaji, I invite you to do so. He's quite the character. He's the one that Steve Jobs tried to get to early in his career. He's obviously the guru of Ram Dass, and the subject of so much in terms of exemplifying this no-bodiness, because Neem Karoli Baba lived only to be in devotion to God, lived only to be in devotion to love. There was no brand marketing about his identity, you see. And so the great stories, and the ones that I continue to love to listen to, are the ones that talk about how when people were around him and physically on fire from just being in his presence, because that's what he was that pure energy, they wanted to harness that. They wanted to get all that they could from him. And so there's one story of a host who locked him in a room without windows, locked him in a room, in order that all of the devotees who were pouring in to sit at his feet could still have access to him, because he was known to just wander off, and he would wander off into the forest, never to be seen again. And they wanted to be in that illuminating fire. Who wouldn't, right? So let's keep him here. Let's feed him. Let's watch him. Let's care for him. But let's make sure he stays here. And one of the stories that Ram Dass used to say was that one of the people who was tasked to making sure that Neem Karoli Baba was cared for comes running back to this compound in India of the host saying, "Who let him out? Who let him out? He's miles down the road walking towards the forest." And the host still had the key to the room in his pocket, and again, no windows in the doors. And so, not to get into the physics of this, but you see Neem Karoli Baba in his complete surrender of being nothing became masterful of the access of that energy. And that kind of energy is the creator of matter. He's not confined to the physicality of his body. He's not confined to that locked room. And so we read stories like that and we go, oh, but there's something to that. There's something to that when you start to understand and become humbled by, when I start to understand and become humbled by the opportunity that we have to access the allness of energy. That energy is the indicator of the form of matter. Again, not anything that you don't know already, but it isn't until we willingly begin to fall into, surrender, if you will, lean into the nobodiness that we can even begin to scratch the surface of swimming in this ocean of deep inspiration. And I don't know what mile marker or stop along the way it was for me that I finally became more attuned to that. I became less attracted to trying to preserve the somebody, about trying to get people to like me or being concerned about what others thought, but began to continue to extricate myself from the somebodyness. And that's because only when I can become nobody do I have access to all the energy. That's the paradox, right? That's the way that this works. So why am I going here in this moment in time in human civilization when there seems to be so much unrest, so much disruption? Well, I think it's important for you and I to get really, really clear about your power. To get really clear about your power, your potentiality with that power. And that power and the allness of that power is dependent on you and I letting go of our story, letting go of whether it's pretty or not, letting go of all form and surrendering to the allness. And like that great Ricky Byers song, use me. A sincere use me to that power. And so as I was working with many clients over the last couple of weeks, some of the things that I started to see was that our values need to be re-examined. I'm big on values. I'm big on bringing clarity to what matters to you. Just as that phraseology jumped off of that Alice Walker novel page, a value should do that for you. It should draw you in. A value, for example, to me, since childhood, is adventure. That value was birthed from being confined in an impoverished circumstance, in an abusive circumstance. And it was through the reading of books up in a tree as a kid that adventure grabbed me and said, this is your ticket out. This is your way to be able to experience something different. And even though I have grown more mature in my relationship with adventure, adventure is still one of my values. And so I say to that value, I'm available. I'm available. But in being available, I have to let go of my somebody-ness. And I continue to have to surrender to where adventure wants to take me. So going back to these values, we're at a point where we can extricate ourselves from our limitations and lean into a power that you and I have yet to explore. But we must become clear and available. And I'm inviting you to consider adding these two values to your list, and that is liberty and justice. Liberty and justice. Just as we pledge and liberty and justice for all, what would happen if you and I extricated ourselves from our limitations, our past, our history? We can't do this because, blow that out, and look at the word liberty. Let it draw you in, just like the word infinite has continually drawn me in. Look at the word justice and let it draw you in. Then let it take your persona, your individuality, your gift, and you become the clay. And let it begin to mold you. But again, it can only mold you at the level of your nobody-ness. Let go of your limitation and lean into it. And let that which is liberty and that which is justice become new value systems for you, for me, for humanity as a whole. And I believe that that is what is calling all of us right now. That is the opportunity to get clear on what your values is, what your values are. And if you have not done that, if you don't have it down, if you don't have your elevator speech when somebody says, what matters to you? You go this, 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 and this. Self-awareness, health, global education, philanthropy, adventure, liberty, justice. Those are the things that matter to me. And I don't care how cornball or simplistic that sounds. If you don't have that as the foundation, and if you don't allow yourself to not be remodeled, but to be built from scratch, at this point, regardless of age, regardless of story, regardless of economic background, you and I, all of us as this commonality, as this one, the all in all wants to use us, but it can only use us if we say, I'm available. And like the story of the origin of I'm available coming from a travel writer named Doug Boyd, he said it's the most powerful mantra that you and I can say. I'm available. And then he adds, but look out. Because if you're sincere, your whole world will change. And it's true. My world continues to change, to dissolve, to crumble, to transform, to erupt, to disrupt. And if I can breathe through that, if I can become less harsh about what I think I'm supposed to do and just listen and lean in and surrender a little more and surrender a little more, then we become the vessels, we become the instruments of the all. You see, that's not anything that you haven't heard before. But we must stop listening to that information from the intellect. We must cease. I say must, I'm talking for myself, I can't speak for you, but I'm no longer interested in the intellectual component of that. I want the tangibility of that. I heard a quote, I think it was attributed to Michael Beckwith, but it was something along the lines of, we must stop seeking to become ascended masters and become descended masters. Simply put, the all in all is already within us. That which is the ascension, genius, vibratory, expansion, infinite nature of mastery is in there. But we have to bring it, we have to descend it into the human experience through tangibility, feeding people, caring for people, advocating for people, loving them. Not just when it's comfortable, but to descend now into form, to take the allness of that infinite energy and then to mold it into the matter that is going to shapeshift, that is going to revolutionize, that is going to unveil the healing that exists already here for us. That is what we are called to do. I hope that maybe one or two, maybe 5 or 7, maybe 10 to 20 of you might take that to heart, that you might actually go and sit down and have a visit with your values, that you might actually write the words liberty and justice on a piece of paper, and that you might speak to those words, I'm available, I'm available. And then go for the ride, and go for the ride. As always, I am so grateful that you come and spend this time with me. It means a lot. It means a lot to me to have this outlet of technology. I never want to take that for granted. Yay, what a time to be alive, right? And so thank you for bestowing upon me your time and your heart and your attention. I love you very much. Till next time.